Hi, everybody. My name is Matthew Campbell with the Mississippi NAACP, and I want to welcome you to part two of Voting for Our Lives. We have two very special guests with us today. Our first guest is Miss RaToya Gilmer. She is the president of the Magnolia Bar Association. And our second very special guest is State Representative Chris Bell. So we want to thank both of y'all for being here with us today for part two of Voting for Our Lives, a very critical conversation about the upcoming election on November 3rd. So we'll go ahead and dive right into it with our first question. So we know that we have a very critical election on November 3rd in a couple of weeks. And we know we have positions on the ballot ranging from president to school board members. But we also have three ballot measures that will appear on the ballot on November 3rd. And so I want to talk a little bit about some of those ballot measures. The first ballot measure is a ballot measure that will legalize medical marijuana in the state. And there are two versions of that measure that will appear on the ballot. Initiative Measure 65 and Alternative Measure 65A. Initiative 65 was proposed by citizens, and Alternative Measure 65A was proposed by the state legislature. The second ballot measure that will appear on the ballot will remove language from the 1890 state constitution that requires a candidate for governor or any other statewide office to receive not only the majority in the popular vote, but to also win the majority of the state's 122 House districts, which essentially establishes an electoral college in Mississippi. And the final ballot measure that will appear on November 3rd is the new design of the state flag. So folks will have a chance to vote on whether or not they approve of the new design of the state flag. So I want to talk a little bit about these measures, especially that first ballot measure, the medical marijuana measure, and talk about what that language means, because in that medical marijuana measure, you have two versions, and the language is almost identical. So what does that language mean? And what are the steps that people have to follow if they want to vote on that ballot, those ballot measures, especially that medical marijuana ballot measure, where you have to vote either or against both, and then you have to proceed to that second question. So what does all this stuff mean to people? Because it can be a confusing process when folks, after they vote for president, after they vote for vice president, after they vote for election commission and school board members, and they come down to those ballot measure questions, and they see this ballot measure about medical marijuana, and they see two versions of it with almost identical language, and then there are all these steps they have to follow, either or against both, and then proceed to the second question. So we'll start with you, Representative Bell. If you could talk a little bit about some of the language that's being used, especially in that medical marijuana ballot measure, what it means, and how people, what some of the steps people should follow when they vote for that ballot measure.
Well, definitely. One of the things that this ballot initiative has done has brought out the opportunity for individuals who are experiencing chronic pain and illness with respect to the 22 debilitating diseases that are helped by medical marijuana was the main reason why this was placed on the ballot for individuals who are suffering from Crohn's disease, cancer, PTSD, multiple sclerosis, and other diseases, that they're in so much pain that they're taking opioids to rectify the pain. Medical marijuana was placed on the ballot because it's an alternative solution, a safer solution versus the opioids. And 228,000 residents of the state of Mississippi signed the petition to put this on the ballot, this initiative on the ballot. And now we have it on the ballot. It is ballot initiative 65. And in this initiative, you have the opportunity to vote, as you said earlier. You either vote for or against the initiative. So when you get your ballot, when you see your ballot at the polls, it'll say vote for the approval of either or against both, which is confusing. And it was meant to be confusing by members of the legislature who put 65A on the ballot. It's pretty much a remnants to initiative 42 a couple of years ago, where you had 42 and 42A, which was placed on the ballot. And it's basically put on the ballot to kill the initiative. And there's no difference here with 65A. If you are in support of Initiative 65, medical marijuana, we are telling individuals to vote for Initiative 65. And then the second step would be for initiative measure number 65. So you have to vote twice for this. It's unfortunate that you do, but you have to. Once again, if you support it, you have to vote for it initially at the first approval of either. And then again, you have to vote again for it for Initiative 65. And as I said, it was definitely put on there to confuse the voters, to make sure that this initiative wouldn't pass. And just to give you a few tidbits about 65A, 65A was just thrown on the ballot. There are no science, there are no committees that have been formed to talk about the use of medical marijuana. All this was done to confuse the voters versus Initiative 65, which has a community of individuals who came together, from doctors to nurses to medical patients, and even some representatives and senators who support this measure came together and talked through this initiative to make sure that it was a very valid initiative to help individuals in the state of Mississippi.
Thank you, Representative Bell. And so, you know, that's a pretty good overview of that medical marijuana amendment or ballot measure. But I just want to note that, you know, here at One Voice of the Mississippi NAACP, we are a nonpartisan organization, so we cannot endorse or support any candidate or any particular measure. But we thank you for that, Representative Bell. And RaToya, if you have anything on the back end you would like to add about that, you can.
Yes, I'd like to, of course, echo what Representative Bell stated. And of course, if citizens, I know when I heard about it, I looked at the copy or the versions of the two initiatives from the Secretary of State's website, and I can see that, of course, there was no budget as far as 65A is concerned. It looks like they're really, I agree with Representative Bell, it's really just thrown on the ballot to as some competitive version of an alternative. However, once you actually look at them side by side, you can tell that it's actually just something thrown in. And so, of course, a lot of people called me after they voted by absentee and were confused by the two versions. So, of course, you do have to vote twice.
And right now, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
While the presidential election is top of the mind for most of us, we must remember we have more at stake on the ballot in November. From the U.S. Senate and House of Representative elections to the new flag design, there are important decisions to be made up and down the ballot. For more information on voting and the duties of elected officials, visit onevoicems.org. We must vote like our lives depend on it, because they do.
November 3rd is an important election day. On this day, we will vote on a president, a Supreme Court justice, a new state flag, and several ballot initiatives. The Election Protection Call Center wants to make sure that all Mississippians can vote. Please call us with any questions about your voting rights at 888-601-VOTE. That's 888-601-8683. Our volunteers will be able to help you find out where to vote, check your voting status, let you know your voting rights if you have a felony conviction, and explain how to vote by absentee ballot. Remember, call 888-601-VOTE or 888-601-8683. This message is brought to you by the Mississippi Civic Engagement Roundtable.
So can we talk a little bit about that second ballot measure, the one that pertains to the 1890 state constitution, the electoral vote in Mississippi? If you're a statewide candidate, whether you be for governor or lieutenant governor, whatever the case may be, can we talk a little bit about where that stems from? Where does this measure come from? Can we talk about the historical relevance of it? And what it would mean for people when they go and they vote either yes or no on this ballot measure.
You want me to start?
Yeah, you can go ahead. I'm sorry. You can go ahead and start.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So the Secretary of State, Michael Watson, placed this on the ballot as a result of the many individuals who have had issue with this provision in the 1890 Constitution. In order for an individual to win statewide office, elected office, they would have to win of the 122 House seats. They would have to win the majority of them. Matter of fact, they would have to win all of them in those districts, those House districts, in order to win. Gary Anderson, who ran for treasurer years ago, is a prime example where he came within 5% of winning the treasurer's race. Only because he did not win the majority of the 122 districts, he did not become the treasurer. This initiative also gives the individuals that are running for a statewide election, statewide seat rather, give them an opportunity to actually win. Of the 122 representatives in the House of Representatives, 42 hold majority Black districts. With this ballot initiative, that changes everything. That changes everything for us to have an opportunity to actually win a statewide election. This initiative, this previous initiative with respect to having to win the seats, the majority of the seats, basically was put in there, the Electoral College, I should say, was put in there by white farmers back in 1890 to make sure that African Americans never won a statewide office. It was done to save and purify and make sure that the House of Representatives, lieutenant governor, and governor seat was white. And that's why that provision was put there. Now we have an opportunity to vote yes for this measure in order to have African Americans have an opportunity to run for a statewide office. It's hard to get 20 to 25% of white buy-in for the statewide candidate versus African Americans always voting for white candidates without a problem. So this will level the playing field somewhat. There's also the opportunity, if there is a tie in the election, that the election contest will not go to the House of Representatives, which it has done in the past. That puts that back into the hands of the voters to have a runoff election, which furthermore gives people an opportunity to let their voices be heard.
Thank you, Representative Bell. RaToya.
Yeah, I hate to sound like a parrot, but I completely agree. I think I've been telling people we have the opportunity to change a lot of things on election day this year. Of course, every election is important, but along with the state flag is also this ballot measure, and it gives African American individuals and politicians the opportunity to win those seats that we traditionally couldn't. And so it's actually referring to removing some language. And so I know a lot of people have been referring to it as the Jim Crow law. And so that's what people are talking about when they are referring to that, that when they say, of course, the Jim Crow law is something that's on the ballot. And so I know a lot of people have heard individuals talk about it, but wasn't sure actually what they were mentioning.
The final ballot measure that folks will see on their ballot on November 3rd, and that's the new design of the state flag. So, a couple months ago, they removed the Confederate insignia from the state flag. And so they designed this new flag, and the flag must now contain the words, "In God We Trust." And so it'll be a simple approve or reject or yes or no vote for this ballot measure. But Representative Bell, I know you've been close to this issue since you're in the state legislature. But can you talk about, if what happens if this new flag design is approved? What happens if it's rejected?
Well, quite honestly, if it is approved, it becomes our new state flag. And if it is rejected, then we go back to the drawing board, have the committee go through hundreds of new designs for the committee to select. And then once the process starts all over again, and we'll have commission hearings rather, and people will have to go through the opportunity to go select another flag. So I know a lot of African Americans are saying they don't care one way or the other, but this is a new day, and I'm quite excited that we have the opportunity to select a new flag.
And just in the event that the new design is rejected, and the committee they reconvene and they say, okay, we got to design a new flag. When will folks, will it be a special election? When will folks have a chance to vote for this new design?
Oh, it would definitely be another special election. It would be set by the commission, but it would be an ongoing process. So if we never select a flag, we'll forever have commission hearings and new designs thrown at us.
Thank you for that. All right. And so our next question is going to touch on voter suppression. We know that this has been a problem in Mississippi for decades. And we know not too long ago in 2013, the United States Supreme Court removed the pre-clearance clause from the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which requires states like Mississippi, with the history of racial discrimination, with the history of voter suppression, to receive pre-clearance before they made any changes to their voting law. So you had this federal oversight, and the federal government said, hey, since you have a history of voter suppression, racial discrimination, if you want to do this to your voting laws, you have to receive federal approval. And so the Supreme Court pretty much removed that oversight process. And so as a result, we saw states like Mississippi adopt voter ID laws and close polling locations. And so we'll start with you, RaToya. So as a voter on November 3rd, when we go to the polls, what does voter suppression, what does it look like? How can we identify voter suppression as voters on November 3rd? And what are our rights when we go to the polls as voters?
So since practicing law, I know we've seen some instances. I know when my grandma was alive, of course, with the passing of the voter ID laws, you saw people go into polling places and your ID might be expired. I think one point hers was, but of course, me and her went together. And so it can be as subtle as somebody telling you can't vote with an expired driver's license. However, as long as it's not 10 years old, 10 years expired, you can still vote. And so you have issues like that. We've seen issues where individuals have voted at a particular precinct since they've been voting, and they appear that day for the election and they're not on the voter roll, or they are claiming that they're at a different precinct. And we've seen instances as such as people just simply asking you to verify your address. And so you show them your ID and then they ask you to verify your address. And so we've seen things like that where people are trying to prevent people from voting simply because they don't have a driver's license that may be a month expired. And so those are the types of things that we are, as Magnolia Bar Association, as well as this organization and others, are making sure that people understand that you can vote with an expired driver's license. Like I said, it just can't be past 10 years expired. The different forms of identification. You might not drive. You might have a state issued ID. Your college ID may serve. Even your voter registration card. And so we've seen instances where volunteers, organizations are putting people in place because like the NAACP and One Voice have their election protection hotline that Magnolia Bar attorneys serve as volunteers during election day. I always tell people, don't leave the polling place without voting. The provisional ballot or the affidavit ballot should be the last resort, but make sure you call the election protection hotline and let them know what's going on, because there are individuals that can advise you the day of, can make sure to there might be somebody on site. And so there are a lot of different things, and I'm amazed and happy at, even during COVID-19, during this pandemic, how we're able to educate voters, even past voters that really just didn't understand, even disenfranchising crime. And so it can be as subtle as that, or if I've heard of instances where there was a police present at the precinct, and so even the not having enough ballots. And so it's a wide range of things that can count as voter suppression.
Representative Bell, you want to add anything to that?
Oh no, I can attest to being to witnessing voter suppression a couple of years ago up in Tutwiler, Mississippi, during a special election where you had individuals riding around the polls, police officers or individuals pretending to be police officers or investigators, to where they were pretty much just standing at the door, trying to harass people by asking for IDs before they had walked through the door. But fortunately for those individuals that were in that precinct, myself and other individuals who were there were able to stop the madness that was taking place there. So voter suppression is real. It is definitely going to take place, especially at this election, not necessarily in the state of Mississippi, but we know it's happening in other states, where you had a judge, and I can't remember the state, where, I think it's Texas, where he indicated that you can only have one drop box for one county. And if that is not voter suppression, I don't know what is.
And right now we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Literally means power to the people. Not everybody's on board with that. Some people would rather not see you vote this November. They know that when you vote, things change. So here are some facts. Your state may have requirements to show some form of ID other than your voter registration card. You may have been removed from voter registration rolls or placed on a special inactive list without even knowing it. Someone at the polling place may give you a hard time because you moved, or because you haven't voted recently, or because you don't look like you belong, or for no reason at all. There may be a police presence or challengers trying to deter you from voting, but this is voter suppression. Do not let it stop you. You can go online to check your registration status, see important deadlines and rules for your state, find your polling place, and learn how to vote from home. You have a right to vote and to have your vote counted.
We've said their names. We've marched in the streets. We've sparked a new movement. And now we have more work to do. This year, One Voice and the Mississippi NAACP have collaborated to create a space for all of us to work on our agenda, the Black Agenda. This series of events includes the Mississippi Black Leadership Summit and the Mississippi NAACP Virtual Convention and Policy Institute, along with a menu of great opportunities to share your thoughts and learn how you can plug in. We need your solutions, your ideas, your voice. We need you.
So we'll move to our third and final question. Can you, and we'll start with you, RaToya, on this. Can you talk about some of the efforts that you're involved in to make sure that each Mississippian on election day is able to exercise their right to vote?
So right now, we really have been, when I say we, I'm speaking for the Magnolia Bar Association, really been pushing the issue of voter education. There have been community organizations that we've partnered with. One of the things we made sure to do this year is to make sure people understood what disenfranchising crimes were. A lot of people think if they're convicted of any crime that they can't vote. And so we did, and I will thank my district directors and other members, did a great job of using social media during this pandemic to let people know that you can vote. It's 22 crimes. You got to be convicted of them. And so there are certain things that take away the right to vote, but most people don't know what they are. And so we did, I think organizations have done a great job, as well as our organization, of educating voters. We've also planned to serve the ABA and the NBA, all have initiatives. And while they pushing the issues this year, we've always helped with election protection through One Voice, NAACP, and there are some others that are volunteering as poll watchers or poll workers during the election day.
Thank you for that. And just so folks can know what those disenfranchising crimes are, and these are crimes that only apply to the state of Mississippi. So if you were convicted of these crimes in another state or federally, you can still vote. And so these crimes are armed robbery, arson, bigamy, bribery, carjacking, embezzlement, extortion, felony bad check, felony shoplifting, forgery, larceny under lease or rental agreement, larceny, murder, obtaining money or goods under false pretense, perjury, rape, receiving stolen property, robbery, statutory rape, theft, timber larceny, unlawful taking of a motor vehicle, and voter fraud. So those are the disenfranchising crimes in Mississippi. And we know that that's one of the most common misconceptions that people have, that, you know, hey, if I've been convicted of a felony, that means I can't vote. And that's not true. If you haven't been convicted of one of those crimes, you are still an eligible voter in the state of Mississippi, and you can vote on November 3rd. And RaToya, thank you for bringing up the work that the Magnolia Bar Association does, the work that you do with election protection with One Voice and with the Mississippi NAACP. And so I want to put this out there. If folks would like to volunteer, be election protection volunteers, answer phone calls, make phone calls, please visit onevoicems.org, and you can sign up to be a volunteer there if you click on the election protection tab. So that concludes our questions. If Bill wants to add anything about some of the stuff he's involved in.
Yeah, that'll be fine. So my fraternity, Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, we have a national campaign to make sure that we get out to vote. I also serve on the Joe Biden kitchen cabinet, and we have a movement of souls to the polls. So we are encouraging everyone to go out and vote this election. This election is really important. We have an opportunity to change the course of the history of the United States of America. We have the opportunity to change the course of the state of Mississippi. We have Mike Espy on the campaign trail. We have Justice Latrice Westbrook on the campaign trail, Congressman Benny G. Thompson on the campaign trail. And we have an opportunity to make the state of Mississippi, we have the opportunity to make the state of Mississippi much better than what it's been in the past, as well as our nation. With Biden and Kamala Harris on the ticket together, we are in a great position to move the United States in a great direction.
We want to thank both of y'all for joining us today. It was truly an honor and a privilege to have both of you, very distinguished guests, with us today for this critical conversation about voting for our lives here in Mississippi. But before we conclude, we would like to send a special thank you to One Voice Executive Director, Mrs. Nashambi Lambright Haynes, Mississippi State Conference NAACP President, Dr. Robert James, and Executive Director, Dr. Corey Wiggins. But we want to thank y'all for taking our time being with us today. We want to thank all of our guests for tuning in, and we truly appreciate it. Thank you, everybody.
Man, thank you.
Thank you.